Part 2.
Okay, so here's part 2 of the letter SHIN. So SHIN is teeth. SHIN noon, SHIN yod noon, SHIN noon is teeth. Well, what do teeth do? Well, teeth, you can say, are shiny. That's why we get the English word sheen, shine. The sheen of something is how it shines. The gloss factor. Shin Nun Aleph and Shin Nun Hey in Hebrew both have to do with the number 2. I think it's Shin Nun Aleph is also the color red, and it means difference or variance. There's a word, 2 words, lashon hara in Hebrew. It means the evil tongue. Well, it doesn't really mean the evil tongue. That's the way it's translated. Lashon hara. They say, well, that means saying bad stuff, slander about people. Well, lashon, lamed shin vav nun. Well, shon, lashon, Allah, lamed is a prefix, just means that which is regarding or belonging to. Well, if shon is teeth, yeah, but it's translated tongue. Well, it's actually referring to a language. So you might see sometimes lip, language, or tongue, or teeth, but see, if it means different and variant, and it's the number 2. Yeah, but we were told, we just read, Yahuah Echad is this great, what they call the Shema. Shema Israel, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad. Echad is one singular, unified, mono. It's a little bit more than that, different than that, but those are the basic English words which will get you on track with what the word Echad, Aleph-Bet Dalet means. Just to take that. But this word lashon hara, lashon, well, if it's 2, it's not 1. So if it's different or variant, it's like, so the letter Shin is drawn with a W shape, 2 fangs or 2 spiked teeth, or it's drawn as a square, you might call rabbit teeth, buck teeth idea, 2 teeth, or the rounded, the 2 breast looking drawing, or even in the modern Hebrew, it's a U shape with this other little slash mark, which means it's not 1, there's a variation. And the variation in the modern Hebrew isn't just a straight line right down the middle, but one side is smaller than the other side. It's offset. You can say, well, that's just the way they draw. No, think about that. Think about the shapes of all these different letters Shin, the different options. What are they saying? Just look at the orthography for a minute. Okay, well, there's one thing that's divided in 2. That's okay, it's 2. Okay, well, how do teeth work? The way, if you look at the way human teeth are, right side to left side, you've got a mirror image. Front teeth, the next teeth, the incisor teeth, the molars, and they're all balanced. And then the upper teeth compared to the lower teeth, they're all perfectly balanced, and so that you can bite, so that you can grab, you can grind with the molars. They're designed very specifically that one is fitted to the other. But the modern one, well, they fit together, but one's smaller than the other. Well, the word hara, hey, resh, ayin. Resh ayin is the word that means evil, wicked, harm, calamity, but it's also friend and companion. So you could say, my other friend is lashon hara. Not just me, but just my second, my companion, my other, my associate could be lashon hara. There's an Islamic military call them group in Nigeria called Boko Haram. Boca is the Spanish word for mouth, and hara, the evil mouth. Well, they don't have an evil mouth. They believe the Christians are an evil mouth because that group, it's my understanding that they're Islamic. And so they make it their point to damage and destroy and eliminate the Christian believers in Nigeria in very, let's say, ways reminiscent of what is referred to as the Middle Ages in Christendom. Anyway, the point is the other voice, whether it's a companion or whether it's evil, is that good or bad? It doesn't really say. You see, the words themselves are neutral. Now, if you look in Klein's dictionary, you'll see that there's another word that means lip, language, or tongue, and it's spelled shin, pei, hey, shafah. And Hebrew is referred to as shafah kodesh. Well, kodesh, kuf, dalet, shin. See, it's the vowels could be making it kiddush or kadash or kodesh or kadoshi, but the preliminary three letters are kuf, dalet, shin, and it's the word translated holy, sacred, set apart, sanctified, betrothed. It's completely special, unique, not like any other, in the deific sense. A holy man, a man of God, a saint. The idea that the shafah is a lip, language, or tongue, shin, pei, hey, and if you look at the letters, well, there's a shin, pei is a mouth, hey is an expression. So you could say, well, the mouth expressing shin stuff, that's the word that means lip, language, tongue, but it also means swept clear, smooth, restore to health, and cure from lunacy. I've heard Hebrew referred to as Lashon Kadesh. And it's like, but Lashon means different, variant. Number 2, the color red. So my thinking is that, well, if somebody says Lashon is just another one of the languages, they're all different. That's the thing about languages, different languages. So they're all just more the same that are different. Lashon, and this one happens to be Kadosh, which however you want to vocalize that. And it's like, yeah, but because it's Lashon Kadosh, it's not Lashon, it's Shafah. It's Shafah Kadosh. My thinking is that the only way to refer to Hebrew is Shafah Kadesh. Well, if you look at the dictionary definition, it means lip, language, tongue, but it also means restore to health and cure from lunacy. Yeah, but that's just part of the definition. It's like, no, wait a minute. Think about that. And I'm trying to say this as a way of giving a regard to the study of this language. If it's true that the word shafah means restore to health, cure from lunacy, and it's talking very specifically about the language, then the best thing the enemies of Israel can do is remove the regard of the language being kadosh, sacred, set apart, Yahweh's own personal voice. And they will replace it with the language they control, Greek, Latin, English, just so you know. They get to make up the words, the sound of the words, the utteration of the words, and the meaning of the words. Just so you know, play on words, the word utterance, U-T-T-E-R-A-N-C-E, utterance. Well, it sounds in English the same as like a cow's udder, which is the cow's shad. So you could say the Shaddai, El Shaddai, is the one who gives utterance. Again, you could say, yeah, well, that's just a similar sounding word, utter, U-T-T-E-R and U-D-D-E-R. It's like, as far as I know, the English words and the Latin words, probably even Greek, are spelled the way they are very specifically. And at the top of the chart here, where I have the meanings of the Greek words, those come from a guy named Nigel Pennick, named down at the bottom, very bottom of the chart here. And he was saying, the way you spell a Greek word, yeah, it's phonetic, but the letters that make up the words all have meanings that are listed here, and they're very specifically used to compose the word. But see, in Latin and English, from what I understand, there is no such thing. They're just consonants. But because they're based on Greek, which is itself based on Hebrew, I found it interesting to note that if you know what the meanings of the Greek letters are, they do exactly line up with the Hebrew. In a sense, you can see the correlation. But because there was no digamma, or the letter digamma got dropped out, the meaning of the seventh letter lines up with the sixth, the meaning of the eighth lines up with the seventh. It threw everything out of whack by one letter. So if you're trying to look at, like if you're a student of the languages and you're trying to compare, why does this language not line up with that? It's very confusing. But there's a reason for the systematic order and disorder. One of the things we learned 25 years ago is that in Hebrew, the meaning, the concept of the word key, K-E-Y, like the thing you stick in the lock, it means to unlock. A key is what you use to unlock something. Mem, Petav Het. Petav Het is something which can be opened. Okay, but in Greek, whatever the source of the dictionary was, something my wife found, in Greek, the word key means that's what you use to lock something up. No, wait a minute. You can say, okay, just two different sides of the same coin. No, wait a second. Think about that. So part of this pondering is thinking about what's going on and how does it all work. For the Almighty himself to build the universe with wisdom, Chachma, Proverbs 8, I believe it was the first thing. He established this concept of wisdom by which he built the whole universe. Well, before he built the universe, he built this alphabet, but he first pulled together this concept of wisdom. And some people say, oh, that's the female consort, this lady named Sophia, or Chachma, if it was Hebrew, and it's just his plaything. And what? For every truth, there's a distortion. And if you really want to make sense out of anything, I'm suggesting that the Shofar Kodesh, the sacred Hebrew lip language tongue, will cut through all the stuff and bring back an orientation of sanity. And that it's found in pondering these 22 letters. So if Ehyeh, the I am, Aleph Hey Yod Hey, so he can't even call himself Ehyeh until he first plugs in the letters in sequence and gives a value to each one in a particular order, and then say, I'm going to be the letters 1, 5, 10, 5, Aleph Hey Yod Hey, Ehyeh. What about the other letters? It's because of all the other letters and everything fitting together as a unified whole, the 22 forming one, that he can say, I am 1, 5, 10, 5, Ehyeh. Okay, so if he establishes that what is wisdom, he had to think that up and give it essence, substance. Wisdom compared to not wisdom. Wisdom compared to foolishness, that's maybe the other extreme, but in our experience, but what is this wisdom? It's the way everything works. It's the way everything fits. It's the way of this causes that, or this bumps into this and that happens. If you look at something called Newton's cradle, they got 5 steel balls hanging from a string in this, like the little setup. and you move this one, you take this one ball out and you drop it and it hits that, none of these other balls will move, but the shock wave goes through them and the last one flies out this way. Then it comes back and that last one flies out. And it's like, isn't that curious is the way it works? The curiosity of mechanical engineering, I see as a very blatant manifestation of wisdom, meaning the Almighty himself built the entire universe to work systematically, cause and effect, whether you see it or not. If you see it, that's manifest. If you don't see it, but it's there, that's called latent. If it hasn't become expressed yet, or if it's just hidden and it's operating, but you don't see it, it's still called the latency. Psychological term. So that those terms are used all the time in that study. The point is, if you realize, okay, then the whole universe, the fact that there are essentially 4 seasons, I mean, 2 extremes, summer and winter, then the 2 in between media, the blending times. That's a picture of which it becomes basically a fractal model of something that's bigger, of something that's bigger. Somehow that is a little model that's factored into everything. That's the way he built it. The fact that mathematics works, the fact that chemistry works, the fact that these 22 letters work the way they do and are built in the sequence order is this fractal pattern, like DNA, of how the whole universe functions. So somehow, if to the extent that we understand how these letters relate to each other, we have a view or a handle on the way the entire universe functions. That's just a fact. Whether you understand it or not, whether you believe it or not, I see it as just a fact. Like somebody saying 2 + 2 = 4. Okay, I think I can wrap my mind around that. Okay, the square root of 4 is 2. Okay, I think I can wrap my mind around that. Okay, the square root of -1 is the letter I. It's like, what? There is no square root of -1 because any square root is 2 numbers multiplied by itself gives you the product, but you can't ever multiply 2 numbers and get a negative number like -1. So there is no such thing as the square root of -1. You can't multiply a single number times itself and get -1. Oh, yes, you can, because they can see in the application of the universe, let's say, that there is such a concept, the square root of -1, but nobody can wrap their human mind around it and identify it. So it's just a placeholder, the lowercase letter I. And mathematicians have all agreed that's just what we'll call it. The letter I represents the phantom square root of -1. And because we have the concept and know it's there, we can use that as a tool, plugging it into other shenanigans that we do, other stuff that we're trying to calculate. But nobody can wrap their mind around what that number is because the human brain can't go there. Just can't. Okay, so see, I can look at that and say, well, that's a model, square root of -1. That's a model of some other stuff that Elohim built. And then I could say, well, if I was an astrophysicist, let's say, I could sit there and say, I'm going to look for that as I'm thinking about conducting studies and blah, blah, whatever, however you ever do that, or it doesn't even have to be astrophysicists. It could be looking in the ocean. It can be looking at plants, but I'm gonna see if there's this concept, square root of -1, I can find elsewhere. Now, what I'm saying is, I believe that these 22 letters and the way they fit together is the, let's call it a source code, or the like the teeth of a key that open up wisdom. Okay, so, but Greek, the word key means that which locks up, closes out, makes it hidden, secret, so confused that it's not available. And then I find it interesting that the New Testament, written in Greek or translated from Aramaic to Greek, because Greek was the lingua franca, the common tongue, the commercial trade language at that time in the Roman Empire. Greek was used as, oh, everybody knows Greek. Oh, let's put all the sacred words into Greek. That makes them accessible and useful, but only to the extent that Greek allows it, because it's Lashon Hara. Yes, it's a neighboring associate tongue, but it'll hide it. So I find it curiously interesting that Elohim gave his people in Leviticus 26 this curse, that our enemies would rule over us if we didn't appreciate Yahuah's stuff, his debar, his debarim, his commands, his rulings, his way of seeing and doing things, that if we found them to be detestable, abhorrent, a reproach, yeah, nasty, rotten, stupid, I just don't even care, casual disregard, then if that's our attitude, then times 7, he'll take away his blessings, bring upon the curse, and empower our enemies against us. Times 7. Why 7? Because the word 7, Shin Bet Ayin, like the 7th letter Zion, there's a weapon, and it means word curse. Shin Bet, or the word vow, Shin Bet Ayin, is the number 7, Shin Bet Ayin, and it means to swear a vow, Shin Bet Ayin, to fulfill the vow fully, Shin Bet Ayin, and if you don't, you get cursed, Shin Bet Ayin. Well, Kuf Lamed Lamed, Kuf, Q-L-L, is also the word for curse. A-R-R, like R. That's also the word to curse, but Shin Bet Ayin includes in its meaning of swearing a vow the number 7. It means the curse you get for not fulfilling the vow. And then when you read what Yahuah said in Leviticus 26, reiterated Deuteronomy 28, 1,000 years after that event with Moshe, Ezekiel chapter 4. Ezekiel was told, okay, the coming devastation of the people of Israel is about to happen. And he was told to make a picture of basically like a carving, I guess, or make it out of clay or something, of like what's called a bas-relief of the siege of Jerusalem, and lay naked on one side for 40 days pointing at it, and that's regarding the southern kingdom, lay on his other side 390 days. That's a year and a month pointing at it, and that was for the northern kingdom. What? That was the curse. 40 days for the southern kingdom, 390 days for the northern kingdom. But that he told him that 1,000 years after he told him in Leviticus 26 that there was going to be a curse. Okay, 1,000 years later, now here's the curse. So what does that mean? So now you have to do some sephering, some beaning, some shin ayin reshing. It's like, what did he say? Now there's a verse that says it's the glory, or he thinks it's pretty cool stuff. It's the glory, the kavod of Elohim, to hide a matter. And I heard somebody once say, oh, God doesn't hide stuff. And it's like, I don't know what God you're talking about, but I've found probably a dozen different words in Hebrew that mean secret, hidden, to hide treasure. You look up the word, what's a treasure? Something you hide. Well, what's a treasure box? It's the place you put something where you want to hide it. It's like, well, what is the treasure? It's something you want to hide that you don't want to have. It's like just the concept of something being really valuable, but not for everybody to see and know about. And it's like, yeah, but if you show somebody your best treasure, hey, let me show you some secret stuff, and it's like that's for an exclusive regard of appreciation. So when Yahuah said to his people, hey, if Israel, if you teach my ways, you teach your children to honor me, to regard my ways, You teach your children to value and treasure me and my stuff, my Devarim, my custom, my Moedim, my Shabbat, my name. Teach your children to have a great respect and value, a reverence and an honor. Translated in English, fear. Oh, I'm afraid. Be afraid. He can just ruin your life. But see, the English word fear it works, but it also doesn't work. Why don't we have a regard of Yahuah and his instructions? Because we weren't taught so by our, interesting, most of the words start with P. Parent, pastor, professor, pope, prophet. The people who supposedly really know what's going on, I see, have taught us to not have a regard for Yahweh's stuff. And he tells his people, the obligation is on you to instill this consideration in your children's heart, in their conscious mind, and in their behavior. Do what you have to do when they're children to force their compliance so it becomes traditional, custom, ritual, habitual. So when they're old, maybe when they're teenagers, they'll stray, but when they're old, they'll come back, because that's the way the human mind works. So because we, American 20th century Western culture, Greco-Roman culture, didn't, haven't, won't, it's all lost. It's all totally foreign. And because the Christian mind, the Christian doctrine is freedom in Christ. As soon as you talk about chok, law, Torah, mishpat, mitzvot, it's a horrible binding. It's being confined in some kind of straitjacket. No law. I've had numerous conversations. I know these are real words, and you may not know, I don't do that, but I've heard the words hundreds of times, probably thousands of times. So this is a prevailing concept. An interesting word. Just looking at some words in the dictionary. If you look at SHIN, ayin, resh, it means to cleave or split, to break through, to break open a wall, to break open an otherwise barrier. So the interesting thing about SHIN, ayin, resh is, well, SHIN, this great cleaving, separating. And Yahuah, Yeshua talked about separating between the sheep and the goats, the wheat and the tares, the bridesmaids. Yahuah talked about cleaving, separating, making a very specific distinction between his people and not his people, or his people that walk in his ways and his people that are supposedly his people that don't want anything to do with his ways. He made a very big distinction about that. The word SHIN, ayin, resh means to cleave or split, but it also means, very similar to bin and sefer, it means to calculate and reckon. Reckon. I reckon so. So reckon means, yeah, I'll just, I figure, I calculate. I've done some calculations and some assessment here. I've compared, and that's what I've come up with. Okay, but see, when I hear the word reckon, my mind, because I learned King James English, I learned it when I was a youngin'. All of a sudden, my mind goes to Abraham. Abraham had faith. God said, hey, you're going to have a lot of kids. Okay, Abraham believed it was reckoned unto him as righteousness. So Abraham didn't have to do a single thing. All he had to do was believe the outrageous promise. And then, because of the book of Hebrews, it invokes that story from Genesis 15, that model of Abraham's behavior, believing a promise that he would have children and he didn't yet have any children, and his children would become like the stars of the heaven for quantity, that it was reckoned, King James English, reckoned unto him as righteousness. So see, if I hear that story in those English words, I now have to build my understanding, which then I build doctrine, which I build worldview and view of eternity based on all that. And what I've found is that you go back to the Shafah Kadosh, the Kadesh, lip language tongue of Hebrew, Ivrit, and it doesn't work that way. It's different, because Abraham was told to sephir the stars. Abraham didn't have any children. And Abraham was thinking, I guess I'll have to give my all the stuff that I've accumulated in life to my right-hand man, my servant, who's not even one of us. He's a Eliezer, a guy that was from a neighboring place. And Yahuah said, hey, wait a second, Abraham, step outside, count the stars if you're able. It's like, we all know that that's a kind of a rhetorical command, because nobody can count the stars. Is it a clear night? What time of year is it? I mean, the stars are all moving around anyway. Nobody can count. See, I've already taken what Yahuah said, compared to what science and logic tells me, and says it can't mean that. It can't mean what it says. So therefore, I'm going to arbitrarily make up a whole nother story of what Abraham was told to do, and then what Abraham did in response, and use that as a doctrine pinned to a New Testament verse, which alleviates me from doing anything to receive what Yahuah said he'd give me if I did specifically what he said. And then I can label it heresy if anybody doesn't agree with me, and then do terrible things to them. Torture and death. It's like, no, wait a minute. What did he say? If I go back and I look in Genesis 15, Abraham was told to sephir the stars. Yes, it means count and number, but it also means tell, narrate, to shape hair, border frontier, connect the dots. In other words, Abraham, go out there and connect the dots that tell a story, and take some random shape and give it a shape. And it kind of likes Abraham, kind of sounds like Abraham might have either designed the constellations or took what was already designed and tie all 12 of them, 13 some say, together and cause them to tell a story. And when Yahuah says Abraham believed, that word believe is Aleph Mem Nun, hey, or sometimes you can put the hey in front, hey, Aleph Mem Nun, but Aleph Mem Nun means taught, trained, educated, craftsman, specialist, artisan, somebody that you know is trustworthy, whose work has fidelity and integrity, that whatever he does, it's going to be done right. It is translated believed. Believed meaning not doing anything. Sephir meaning do it with a skill of a professional specialist. So if Abraham, see in my thinking now, if I redesign the story, every night Abraham is going to be sitting there staring at those stars, thinking, making notes, planning, calculating, figuring the whole thing out. Because the promise was your offspring, your descendants, your family, their future, Abraham, is going to be according to the story you come up with. It will be reckoned to you as righteous, reckoned Shinai and Resh. But see, righteousness is Zadikah. And Zadikah is not just the word righteousness, it's victory, deliverance, and salvation. Abraham, with the story you come up with, separating the stars. So right down here, you'll see Genesis 15:5 and the word Mem Zadi Resh, Matzar, which is the constellations. But the word Mazar, as in Mazarot, means twisted and corrupted. Abraham's Aleph Mem Nun Hey, Abraham's Amana. Amana, hey, that's a line of appliances, kitchen appliances. Hebrew. The point is, what Abraham came up with, constellational configurations, have become twisted and corrupted as you replace the Zadi with the Zion, especially when they became pictures of Greek titans, Greek mythological godmen or Nephilim or whatever you want to call them, Hercules and so forth. And it's like, wow. See, once you step back and you look at the Hebrew language, Greek, Latin, Church, Western Hemisphere, and I don't know what's going on in the Orient, and they've got all kinds of stuff. Like, say, you go back to if Shangdi is the same as Shaddai, and that's the first emperor of China, then they've got all kinds of stuff going on that we from the Western side, I would imagine, like the two teeth of Shaddai, the Oriental and the Occidental. Occident is Western, Orient is Eastern, but I'm sure they fit together like two teeth or two rows of teeth, like a football scrimmage line, lined up, center, guard, tackle, end, backfield, going at each other like biting into football line of scrimmage is a perfect picture of SHIN. This word Shin Ayin Resh also means, now think about, it will be reckoned unto you as righteousness. It will be calculated unto you, Abraham, as victory, as salvation. It also means estimate, measure, imagine, to guess, the market rate of like stocks, gate, entrance, the title page of a book, to know, like to actually know, like the word yada, hair, as in the hair of your head, like the sefer that give hair a shape. This is the word for hair. To storm or rage, tremble, shudder, or horrified. To cleave or spit. All that is the word Shin Ayin Resh. So I could say, each letter of the Aleph-Bet is a gateway to a whole understanding, a whole realm, that at the gate is that letter. And if you go into that letter, there's this view of the world, the universe, of eternal expansion, guarded, gated by that letter. But yet we're taught, these are just things to teach little children. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zion. Tet, Tet, Yod, Kaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun. Samek, Ayin, Pei, Zadi, Kuf, Resh, Shin, Tav. Samek, Ayin, Pei, Zadi, Resh, Kuf, Shin, Tav. If these are little things you teach children, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zion, then they're katan, kuf, tet, kuf, tet, QT. Well, that's like the little cute little thing. Well, that's what you teach children, cute little things. You make them simple, you make them colorful. But if you realize each one of these letters is a Shin Ayin Resh, a Migdal, Gadol, a tower of an entrance into a realm of wisdom that was used to set the stage of the universe in all its expanse, infinitely, in all numbers and quantity of dimensions even that we don't even know, but it's all brought back to this gateway. So even though I could project that there's an infinite array of dimensions, of distance, of Ravav, Resh Bet Bet, in ways that, boy, it would take an eternity to fathom, somehow it's all, if you shine a white light in a prism of glass and you get this array of colors, imagine that the infinite expanse was the array of colors, and the white light is, might say, Elohim's Ruach, then the prism of glass is this Aleph-Bet. To shine the Ruach, the mind, the will, the heart, the intention, the being of Ehyeh into a focal point of lens of this prism the Aleph-Bet, and everything projects unto infinity of ways of related that we can't even guess at this point. That's what this is. The SHIN Aleph Resh is that prism, is that gateway, and every letter within it is its own gateway, but they're all echad. So if somebody wanted to say, if there's a Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, I would have to say, well, if you want to take this concept of this Aleph-Bet as being an echad, one, but within its oneness, there's 22 factors, and you want to say and some people call it the Godhead, there's 3 factors. Well, you can say that, or you can say, well, what if there was 22 factors and we only can label 3? It's like, well, within the Aleph-Bet, if he's echad with it, and he uses Aleph, Hey, and Yod, 3 letters to call himself Ehyeh, does that negate his association with the other 19 letters? No. Well, then, what if the Godhead had 22 aspects? Whatever. Think of it however you want to think of it. But what I'm saying is to realize that this is what he made, and to just even say, I'm willing to imagine, I'm willing to go there, I'm willing to let my mind start pondering. That's just the first step. To realize that these letters are these gateways of eternal dimensions of the way everything actually was built beyond the scope of this life unto the next. That makes these, by definition, migdolim, migdal, gimel dalet lamed, mem, the object which is gadol. And the word gadol can mean enlarged, it can mean grandeur, it can mean celebrated, ribboned, festooned, proclaimed. It's like, wowed. And there's the verse, I forget where it is offhand, but it says, well, in Jeremiah 31, I think is where it was talking about saying that his name, his Ot, his Aleph-TAV, Oti, his Aleph-TAV Yod, will no more will anybody need to say, you should know the Lord, because they will all know me, from the least of these to the greatest, from the children to the scholars. They will all know me. That word me is Aleph-Tav Yod, my suffix Yod, Aleph-Tav. What's an Aleph-Tav? An Aleph-Tav is a letter of the alphabet. An Aleph-Tav is an oath, a sign, a symbol, an agreement, a stipulation, or some indication of the stipulation. If you write a letter X, that means my hand's crippled or I'm illiterate and all I can do is put a scratch, a scrawl, but it represents my assent, my signing up for this contract. Just write a letter X. And we still have retained that. In America, you have a contract and somebody says, here, sign it, you want to buy a car. And they'll put a little X in here, write your name with your letters of your name right next to the X. So the X still represents, this is what I'm about. What is the letter X? It's the letter Tav in Paleo. What does it mean? It's a sign. It's a signa, a signature, an insignia, an ensign. It's a symbol that means something. So again, down here on the bottom here, down Daniel 12:4, hide the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Ayin Dalet hyphenated with Ayin Tav, because we know that Ayin means understanding, look, measure, balance, calculate, figure out exactly. Sefer and Bina is basically meanings of the letter Ayin. Ayin the Dalet. What Dalet? Yeshua claimed to be the Dalet, and then Ayin Tav, understand each letter in the way it all fits. And if this is Yeshua, because it tells his story, then it's like this is this key that opens up very specifically because of the Moedim, keyed to, correlated to the Hebrew letters, Yahusha coming from heaven to earth in the tomb, in this place of hidden secret, 3 days and 3 nights, bursting out, resurrecting, rising up into heaven, coming back as the SHIN. This is the key to understanding that riddle of, simply translated, until the time, ayin dalet hyphen ayin tav. And Yahuah had to hide this because of the curse in Ezekiel 4, 7 times 390 on the northern kingdom, 2,730 years. And because Assyria conquered the northern kingdom of Israel in 721 BC. And then you can say, well, what day did they calculate? What time of the year? Does the year start in March or does the year start in January? And so it's like, yeah, who's doing the counting? And then there's some question is, did they hide the number of years? And it's like, but then they've got some computers that can actually tell you this is what the stars look like. And we can wind the universe back. I heard 10,000 is probably any number of years at this point because of the computers they have, but they can show you what the night sky looked like on any day. They know exactly how many years because of where everything is, computer plotting of the stars. So the stars can be used to calculate when in time. And apparently, though there's disagreement about the reckoning of time, we don't know that this is really the year 2026. We still know that it's going to call it the year 2020. What I'm saying is, even if liars have lied about history and about science and about the universe, at least the record looks like this is 2026. And because 721 BC, Assyria took over, 2,730 years brought us to 2010. This chart was made in 2010. And the eriktology class in 2011 about talking about how all this stuff works, I find it interesting to note that the entire world, because of the northern kingdom of Israel being in a lockdown, banishment, excommunication status, overwhelmed by their enemies who were given the power to lie to them, to deceive them, to bind them, chain them, use them as slaves. Well, that would have ended in 2010. But it's not like, oh, we're free, we can do anything we want. Well, you can't do anything you want. Dalet resh resh. Free as a bird to fly, and we're at liberty. Libertarian liberty. Do whatever you want without restriction, or we're free to teshuvah now. We're free to come back to Yahweh's Torah. These words in Deuteronomy 6, 7, 13, 14, look at those four in particular. But if we're now free to come back to Yahweh's words, then what it means is, because he said so, he had to keep himself away from helping us in the full capacity that he wanted to. Even if our ancestors were good Christians, good believers, the suffering of everything Yahweh said is that he disallowed himself from being our Elohim, our great help, our great refuge, because that's what the design of everything is about. When he cursed his people, he really laid the curse on his people. But what he said was, in other places we've talked about, as much as I wasn't kidding around when I said I was going to curse you, and I poured out my wrath on you, and I turned my back, and you screamed under the torment, the death, the torture, the destruction of your enemies, and I just bore your screams. When you come back, I will lavish my compassion, and I will tear apart your enemies with such vengeance. See, I read that's what's in front of us. And I've never heard that from the Christian eschatology, ever. They have a whole different picture of the rapture and the tribulation and who's going to get tribulated, why. Their God who's going to run that is not Yahweh's Avot, the Elohim of Israel, that I read in these words. And so I'm left with this decision, this dilemma. Who am I going to believe? Where am I going to hang my hope? And if I read, Yahweh said In Leviticus 19, he says, I'm Kadosh. Israel, you are to be Kadosh. You're supposed to be just like me. And so I'm telling you, Israel, do not eat certain items. To you, they are not food. In fact, if you eat certain things like pork and shellfish, if the fish does not have skins and scales, do not eat it. It will abominate you. Do not eat predators. Do not eat rodents. Do not eat reptiles. Do not eat birds of prey. I'm going to give you a list of what you can eat. This is your food. And then people say, well, but Peter had a vision. Kill and eat, Peter. Arise, kill and eat 3 times. And so Peter said, well, okay, gee, I've always smelled pork on the barbecue of my neighbors, and man, it smelled good. Thank you, God. Now I can eat pork all I want. Woo-hoo. No, Peter didn't say that. Peter said, no freaking way, man. I am not going to get up and eat that. Never have and never will. This is some kind of a trick. Is this a vision from God? Or is this a vision from the devil getting into my mind in my sleep? See, Peter knew that he wasn't being told, eat that food, because it's not food. There's a trick. So, wait a minute. When the Gentiles came to the door, Peter said, got it. It's about the Gentiles. It's not about the food. I'm not going to eat that stuff. It's not food. So you see in the book of, I think it's in Matthew, where Yeshua said, it's not what goes into a man that defiles him. It's what comes out of his mouth. Aha! Eat whatever you want. Now see, now you're playing with the word abomination, the word defiling, the word eat, the word food. What would Yeshua say? And if Yeshua told his people, his disciples, his taught ones, that they can eat the food that Yahuah told Moshe in Leviticus 19, do not eat. This is not food. Well, then Yeshua is some kind of punk. He can't be the Messiah. So if that guy that said those words goes under the AKA acronym of Jesus Christ, then he is a counterfeit Messiah, which makes him Antichrist. If he told his disciples to eat pork, he's Antichrist. Because Yahuah says, Israel, I'm Kadosh, you're to be Kadosh. You, Israel, are my treasured people. You, Israel people, I have fashioned for myself. What does that mean? I have fashioned for myself to be my bejewelment, my headdress. Pei Aleph Resh is the word. Think about that. Yahuah can wear any stylish hat that he wants, but he wants Israel on his head. Kind of like if you're Davy Crockett and you get a raccoon and stick it on your head, and that's your hat. Hey, I think it looks pretty cool. A raccoon hat. How about that? It's like, well, you can wear any hat you want, but Yahuah's wearing Israel as his headdress. But he says to Israel, you can't be having bacon on your cheeseburger if I'm going to be wearing you on my head. You, Israel, need to emanate my glory. And if you eat what defiles and pollutes and abominates you, I'm taking you off my head. You're not going to be in that capacity. So just think about that. So the enemy of Israel reads that, and gee, they get it. It's written in pretty simple English, isn't it? So they make the great Christian teaching that you can eat everything you want and glory and revel in liberty of God's compassion and kindness, eating pork and shrimp, shellfish, whatever you want. Whatever you want. It's not what goes into your mouth. Well, first of all, that stuff isn't food for Israel. It's not food. He said, Yahuah said to Israel, do not eat it. For our enemies to say, hey, you got teeth. He's the great El Shaddai. That's not what pollutes you. You're the rest man. Eat whatever you want. Jesus rose from the dead. You can eat pork. See, they can take these same letters and they can take the same meanings and they can just twist, they can mazar, twist and corrupt all the bejeebers out of it. Your job, my job, is to sit there and say, how do I not get fooled again? How do I not get bamboozled, bewitched, bewildered, befuddled, beguiled. Stupid Adam and Eve. Ha, look what you got us into this trouble. No, we're doing the same dang thing, maybe even worse than Adam and Yahuah did by being tricked and boggled by the words of the Nachash. I mean, we have the Ruach of Elohim, the Ruach HaKodesh of Yahweh Zavot, the Elohim of Israel, we have access to. We have Yahusha and his words and him dying and resurrecting. Adam didn't have that. Abraham didn't have that. David didn't have that. We have all this. And we're still eating pork. Bacon wrapped around shrimp, mighty tasty. But from what I read, Israel's not allowed because it will abominate them. And if we sit there and say, well, abomination is it'll make you unclean for 24 hours, as one friend said one time, it's like, no, wait a minute. Because we belittle the significance of the impact, we belittle the significance of the command. What if I could tell myself a story where suddenly the impact was a lot bigger? If I was to say, if I choose as a common man to be saved, to be born again, to enter the kingdom of heaven, and I turn my back on the world and I turn my attention to being Yahweh's people and to learn his instructions and to take it to heart and spend my whole life doing it, believing in the resurrection of the dead and ascending up into the heavenlies where we can be his Kadoshim Elyonim, the saints of the Most High. And yet if I eat a piece of bacon, stop right there. No entrance for you. What? He said so. No, stop right there. This is a gate. If you are found to be abominated because you had bacon on your shrimp, because your pastor said it was okay, you're not getting in. See, if I can imagine a story where suddenly it's a big deal, how big of a deal? What if I shout louder? What if I pound their pulpit? Will you listen then? No, because you don't care. You just don't care. Whatever, casual disregard. And then I read where Yahuah in Leviticus 26, he says, if you, Israel, any of you individually, if you have a casual disregard, whatever, then I will deal with you with a fury of casual disregard. I mean, how do you show what the fury of casual disregard means? It means he's going to call in our enemies. They're going to lie to us. They're going to make life painful. They're going to make life disappointing. They're going to steal all this stuff. We're not going to get access to what Yahweh promised. They're going to be so smug, laughing, taking all the money, taking all the food, taking all the fun we could have had on the life. And they're going to think that they're so smart that it was all them. And Yahweh said, but I let them do that to you while the time of the curse was going on. But Israel, though I poured out my fury on you, it was only a little bit. It's only a little bit of fury. You just kind of ticked me off. But when I bring you back, or Ephraim says, bring me back, and I will come back. When you come back, walk in my ways, my commands, my chok, mishpat, mitzvot, my Torah. And I'm going to turn against your enemies. And you will walk on their ashes. Is that up in heaven? See, he keeps talking about us living on the earth, that this earth was made for us. The whole Christian mind that I was learned was, get me off this planet. We're going to the by and the by, woo-woo in the sky. We're going to heaven. Cloudland somewhere. He doesn't say that in the Old Testament. I don't know. I don't know where we're going to end up. I don't know that if we take a last breath on earth, we suddenly go to the heavenly realm, or we lay on earth and are resurrected later. I don't know. I don't know if the world is flat or spherical. I don't know whether there's a firmament which keeps us in and there really isn't any space going out there. Maybe it's some kind of dimensional on a screen. I don't know. I know I've been lied to. I know I've been misled. I know that I don't know. I don't know what I don't know, but I can look at what Yahuah said and say, I can see in these words exactly what he's talking about. And then I can go to church and school and read in books of my contemporary culture and say, I don't see anybody talking about or writing about what Yahuah said. Why not? Why not? Yahuah gave a promise to his people, and yet everything we hear is not that. It's some other story. I'm not saying that Yahusha is not significant. Because of Yahusha's narrative, gospel, chronological story, it validates these 22 letters. Came from heaven to earth, born of a woman, Hey Vav Zion, behold this man, Pilate put him to the weapon. That's his whole life here, put into the tomb 3 days and 3 nights later. He rose up, but the same way that 3 days and 3 nights he resurrected, I can see this as being the story of the Israel. So he was in this suffering, being, he was in this pattern. In the same way that he was in the tomb and resurrected, Israel's thrown into the dispersion of Yahweh's curse upon them, and they get to come back. Just like Yeshua resurrected out of the grave, we get to come back to Yahweh's favor, his words, his language, his Shafah Kadesh. And then we operate sheening in the capacity of reshing, but you better not be doing the abominable if you want to endure in that capacity. And perhaps, I mean, there's a place, was it in Zechariah or wherever it is, it says something about that. It seems like it's saying that the last generation is going to be living for 1,000 years. Oh, come on, people don't live 1,000 years. Well, gee, Adam did, and that whole generation before the flood, and even after the flood, they were living for 1,000 years. Yeah, well, read about Ken Hovind and a few other guys that study the nature of the earth before the flood, and there was a dome, they say, that was over it. The canopy theory, well, there's a firmament, same kind of thing. Well, it's different, whether it was made out of ice or whatever. But I remember hearing about that back in like 1963, 64. There was a geologist at our church. Whole different than the flat earth theory. It was a concentric sphere around the earth. Anyway, the point is, the oxygen levels were different, nitrogen different. The place grew like a greenhouse. And if Elohim were to make the last 1,000 years similar to the first 1,000 years, would he? Could he? Well, look at the Moedim. Pesach is 1 day, and then unleavened bread is 7 days. On the opposite side, you got 7 days of Sukkot, then you got Shemini Atzeret, 7 and then 1. Kind of. If he was to make bookends of us living for 1,000 years, might we end up living for 1,000 years on the face of the earth? Well, not if we're whisked out of here in a rapture and taken up into the heavens, unless he comes back. And then, just for what it's worth, there's people who talk about the Tartarian Empire. It's like, well, they were around for 1,000 years, a worldwide empire. And yeah, but what if that was the 1,000-year reign? What if the Tartarian Empire was the time that Yeshua came back, Revelation 19, 1,000 years ago, and that the days we are living in right now are Revelation 21, where the devil was thrown into a bottomless pit for 1,000 years. He gets let loose, and he's running around deceiving the whole world. What if that's where we are right now? Maybe. Well, then what would we be doing? What would it look like if the 1,000 years he gets let loose, and he's running around deceiving the whole world? What if that's where we are right now? Maybe. Well, then what would we be doing? What would it look like if the 1,000 years of the Messianic reign on earth, Revelation 19 initiated it? What if that was, let's just pretend, 1,000 years ago, where the Tartarian Empire did these incredible buildings, incredible technology, flying machines, and all kinds of healing and health with notes and music and frequency, and they built the cathedrals, on and on and on. Let's pretend for a moment that all that happened behind us. That was the Revelation 19 1,000-year reign, and a couple hundred years ago, somewhere, let's say in the 1800s, the devil was let loose out of the bottomless pit, and we are now the generation experiencing him running around the world trying to deceive everybody, like it says in Revelation 21. I was never taught that. Yeah, but see, the word SHIN resh means to imagine, to calculate, reckon, imagine, measure. What would it look like if, somebody, if we are before Revelation 19, say Revelation 18, where this great Babylon the Great gets wiped out, well, then we expect that's in front of us. So we have this anticipation of some sort of coming events. And I'm just saying, what if we were deceived and we think that's where we are, but we really are over here, and the devil's running around trying to deceive everybody, and it's like, well, what should we do then? Exactly what we're doing now. Look at what Yahuah said. And if this is the time of that, not Yeshua coming back, Revelation 19, but us waking up outside of the curse and saying, let's just do what Yahuah said. It's no different. We are here now. What did Yahuah say? Let's learn his language, read his words, sanitize, restore to sanity our mind because of his language, and let's together, Yechad, Yod-Chet Dalet, do what he said. Let's do what he said. And that way our generation can be the Resh generation of Yahuah saying, if only my people would do this, if only this heart was in them. It could be. I could declare it and say, let's say it is. This heart that he projected into the future lands on us. We receive it. We be it. We are it. We are that generation. I am that people, as are you. Let's walk in his ways. Let's say with vigor, Hodu la Yahuah Tov, ki leolam chazdo. What his chesed, his tender loving kindness, his vision of what he promised for us when we come back and do so, just like he said, is beyond calculation, is leolam, this infinite beyond. So when he says, where is one who counts? Where is one who weighs? Where's one who will count the towers? See, you read the rabbinical commentary, and it says, oh, well, when the Babylonians sieged Jerusalem and they set up these towers to bring up against the walls, somebody's supposed to count them. I think there's 12 of them today. Maybe it's like, what? Where's one who will weigh these matters? Ayin, calculate, understand, and counts the towers. Where's one who will sefer the migdalim? That's what it says. Where is one who will see the story in these migdalim? Well, it's got to parallel the story written in the stars that Abraham in Genesis 15:5 matzard. It's got to be that story. Do you think if Abraham understood, if Abraham was told, your children are going to be stupid idiots, they're going to go astray, and they're going to get a blessing and a curse, and they're going to go for the curse, and then they're going to get the chance to come back, but they're too stupid, so they're going to continue the curse. And you guys end up losing until the Savior whisks you away in a rapture, and then God in his fury destroys the whole earth. Whew, done with that. Or do you think Abraham would have said, hey, listen, okay, we may make some mistakes and be some stupid idiots who change the manufacturer's specification of design, but we're going to come back because Yahweh's Ruach is faithful to preserve us. And when we come back, we get the victory. We get delivered from our enemies, and Yahweh rejoices over us. And we rejoice to be his people. That's the story. That's what's got to be written in the stars. But you change them to Greek titans, and the story's gone. You can get a couple people to write books about the constellations and see the message of the Christian Jesus in there, probably. But is the story of Israel, Am Israel, the people of Yahweh's Avot, walking in the ways of his Torah? Can you see that story in there? I'd mentioned that when we're done with this, which will take some more time, I was going to address these constellations. And there's a lady named Sarah Perry. She has a thing, if you go to Sperry Spot, Sperry Spot, she's done a bunch of research on the constellations. And Greg here has done a bunch of research on the constellations. And so hopefully we'll be able to pull together some of these perspectives. But what I'm saying is, just like Abraham was told to sephir the stars, and nobody can count the stars. It's all how you translate the word sephir. He certainly, I believe, did sephir the stars, weaving together the constellations, and that there's a message in there which is true, which maybe hasn't ever even been told. I don't know. There was a fellow by the name of John Dilday that was studying the stars for decades. It was his passion. He died a few years ago, but I was trying to work with him because he couldn't find record of where this story is told in anybody's book talking about the stars. So we might think, well, there's got to be somebody out there. It's like, we'll put together a study. See, if you don't believe in Yahusha, you're not going to see the story. If you don't know these 22 letters, you're not going to see the story. If you're a Christian author and you don't know the Moedim, you're not going to see this story. So every single author of any study who doesn't have a regard to the Moedim is going to miss it. Doesn't know. It's just not going to be there. And if you choose to eat bacon on your shrimp, you're not going to see it because you are intentionally blinding, crippling, sabotaging, destroying your own credibility. The interesting thing here, there's a couple other words which mean gateway. One is bet, like bet lamed, like Nabal. Abigail, his wife, said, man, the guy's a fool. Nabal's his name, and he certainly is a fool living into his name. Nun bet lamed. Babel, bet lamed, confusion, because bet lamed has to do with foolishness, but bet is a gateway. So Babel, bet lamed, is a gateway to confusion or foolishness. So mystery Babylon, is that the church? Is that American culture? Is that Greco-Roman worldview? I mean, you can define it as you will, but bet, just so you know, is a gateway or an entrance. Bet, hey, is the pupil of the eye, a doll. Nun bet is hollow. Nun bet. So bet is a gateway, but it's also some sort of a capacity, a hollow capacity. So you get het bet means to love or endeared. So if bet is this hollow, then what's het? Well, het is like this big fence. So what I'm saying is the word that means to love, endeared, beloved, het bet yod is a hiding place. Het bet yod bet, beloved, lovely, agreeable, pleasant. Het bet yod bet vav nun. And I'm going through this list because I'm showing you the way the language works. If you add a yod vav nun, like Zion, Zadi yod vav nun, well, what's a Zadi? If Zadi is command, is resurrection, If Het Bet Yod Vav Nun is a hiding place, latency, a cache, somewhere you hide something, well, what's a Het? A Het is like this enclosure. And Yod Vav Nun then is the suffix, which means that's the place where you do that. Well, then what's Zion? Well, if Vav is a command, Zion, Mount Zion, the heavenly Jerusalem, the new Zion. I mean, see, if I glorify it as some sort of mythical Camelot-like Zion, it's meaningless. But if Zadi is resurrecting the commands of the covenant and the reality of Yahusha coming out of the grave in the Resh capacity in full vigor, it's just like watching the meaning of the word spelled Het going into this tomb as a hiding place of latency. Zadi, the other side of the Het, is the manifest in brilliancy. And it's all in sitting and looking at the spelling of the words, seeing the prefixes and the suffixes and knowing the meaning of the letters. And then you realize the word that's spelled Het Zadi is the word for arrow, or to cut something in half, or where you get the word sagittal, Sagittal. Sagittal means, well, that's like an arrow head. Well, that's like the constellation Sagittarius. Sagittarius has nothing to do with astrology, but that means there's something about that constellation that has something to do about a guy with an arrow. He's the archer on the back of a horse. And I said, no, I know what the picture is, and I know what people say about it, but now I have to take the concept of Het Zadi. What has that got to do with that constellation? And if Het is this place of keeping the promises dormant, under the curse, hidden secret, until it's time to blast open with the resurrection of the restored language. That's Sagittarius. Do they ever talk about that? I don't know. They will talk about that. But what I'm saying is that to realize that and to say, this is Yahweh's avot. This is what he has built into the language. And only part of it is looking at the dictionary. The other part of it is being able to sit here and look at the construct of how the language was built, comparing Het Bet Bet, with Shin Ayin Resh, with Zadi Vav, with Resh Shin Tav, and putting this whole thing, building the whole thing together in your mind, because it's in your heart. Het Bet Aleph, hiding place, concealed. Het Bet Hey, to hide. Nun Het Bet Hey, hidden. Het Bet, bosom. So what's your bosom? It's not the Shaddai, it's the inner part of what the hollow place within you. Het Bet Lamed. See the benefit of the dictionary, you're looking at it, your eyes are seeing other things. Right next to Het Bet Yod, see alphabetical order, Het Bet Lamed is a roped off area or a portion, kind of like a fenced off area, a separate area. The graveyard, the crypt, a separated area, Het Bet Lamed. It also means act corruptly, ruin, and destroy. Well, you take criminals and you execute them and you throw them in the dungeon like Joseph. That's what the tomb is. That's what the curse is. Israel acted corruptly, so they ruined Yahweh's vision of his relationship with his people, and they destroyed the whole thing. Yahweh destroyed the whole thing. But it also, Het Bet Lamed also means to vow. It's a synonym with Shin Bet Ayin. It means to pledge. So when people call you up and, yeah, we're on a pledge drive, we're going to get you to pledge sending us $10. And, yeah, I'm going to send $10. Well, why'd you give a pledge? It's like, if you made a pledge, and if you don't keep that pledge, you have now put yourself under a curse. Why don't they tell you that before they make you give a pledge? What I'm saying is, the way Yahuah built this place, this word Het Bet Lamed means to bind by making a pledge. It's also the word writhe and travail. It's also the word for a pregnant woman in the throes, the pain of suffering of giving birth. And it's like, you make a vow that you don't keep, and yeah, that's the picture of it. And you go, well, what vow didn't I keep? The great vow. Everything you always said, we will hear and we will do. I don't have to do that. I'm not a Jew. If you want to be Israel, that's what you're buying into. Not me. I'm adopted into the family of the church of Jesus Christ. Is there any truth to that? I believe that there's, according to Scripture, that anybody who's a proselyte, a sojourner, not Israel genetically, but wants to be because, hey, here's Yahweh's words, you're grafted in to Israel. Yeshua is the vine, we're the branches. Yahuah himself is the you might picture as the root. His word is the seed. We're grafted into Yahusha. Is there another tree? I mentioned last week that perhaps there's different capacities. Well, there's the treasured people of Israel, but are there people that are guests at the wedding besides the bridesmaids, besides the bride, besides the guests that were invited? Then they didn't want to show up, and so then the servants of the master were told, go out and just find stragglers and compel them to come in. Street people if necessary. Just bring them into my. I prepared a big meal and I'll have it to be eaten. It's like the dividing. See, the word het zadi is not just arrow, bisect, right down a line right down the middle like the teeth of SHIN, but it's also any partition. You can divide a highway into 5 lanes like a freeway. They're all het zadis. So how does this work? The word het bet lamed also means a cord, a rope, a measuring line, rigging ropes, cables, like a square rig mast the ship where you have ropes tying the thing down so when there's strain of the wind in the sails, it's not going to rip the ship apart. All the ropes are to tie it so that when the forces blow, it moves the ship. You could say that everything Yahweh said is het bet lamed, ropes, rigging to tie the sonic masts on our ship of being so that when the winds blow through the sails, we won't get ripped apart. Just do what he said. Do what our forefathers, thank you, promised that we do. Everything Yahweh said, we will hear it. We will do it. We will shema, shomer, and ashah, everything Yahweh said. See, this same word, het bet lamed, means injury, damage, wounding. It's like, if you don't do what he said, if you are not tied with the rigging and the mast gets ripped off and the deck gets torn out and the ship goes against the rocks because you can't steer because you weren't tied with the rigging of Yahweh's instructions. But see, this also, the same word means indemnity paid to the wounded. You might get wounded if they lied to you and you were keeping the wrong gospel. You had the wrong Jesus. You had the wrong God. It wasn't Yahweh's Avot, the Elohim of Israel. But Yahweh's promise of het bet lamed, part of his roped off area is if you act corruptly, you're going to catch hell. But even if you bring ruin upon yourself, if you come back and fulfill the pledge, the vow that everything Yahweh said, we will hear and we will do, there's indemnity to be paid to the wounded. He will restore. Does that mean we're earning our salvation? No. Yahusha died on the cross to give us salvation. Thank you, Yahusha. This is just doing what he said because this is the way it works. It's the mechanics of the universe. There's that old picture of a wood, I think they call it wood print or wood carving or something. But anyway, it's like the edge of this firmament. There's in here, there's the nature, and the guy's wearing a bit of a patterned, geometrically patterned cloak. But he's got his head poked through, and behind are all these gears and levers and stuff. A very famous painting picture. But the point is, that's kind of the way it works. And if our enemy can get us to eat what Yahweh said not to eat, we've been sabotaged. Ket Bet Lamed. If we just do what Yahweh said and don't eat what we're not supposed to eat and don't work when he said not to work, then we are bound by the pledge, the vow of being his people. But then we get everything that he vowed and he pledged of being our Elohim. To know this, to calculate, to reckon, is Shin Ayin Resh. To be able to beam, to sefer, to shayir, you have to be able to know what all these letters mean. When Yahushua said, when he was just about out of here, I think it's the tail of the last couple of verses of the book of Matthew, he rose from the dead, just about ready to rise up into the sky. That was the next thing that happened. He says, all authority has been given unto me in heaven and earth. It's like, why are you saying that now? Because HMShKN TBNYT means authority, licensed, permitted, empowered. For him to say, all authority has been given unto me in heaven and the earth, he is claiming, remember when Nicodemus said, we know you came from heaven to earth. So if ALEF-BEIT Gimel Dalet is, I am the one coming from heaven, voyaging in a body to earth, born of this woman, I am this guy, and now all authority has been given unto me in heaven and earth, and then he disappears, but he's coming back. What I'm saying is that I find it really interesting. Bet Gimel Dalet is to be in disguise, cloaked in the secrecy. Here he's blatantly declaring this is what he gets as privilege, as honor, as distinction for being the one who ran this gamut. Just to be able to see that, appreciate it, and know these letters and ponder it. I would greatly urge you to do your own pondering of these matters. To take whatever time it takes, sit out somewhere, staring at the river or in a meadow, or staring at the ceiling if that's what you have. I'm just saying, staring at the sky. Just ponder these matters. And what I did by making this graphic, make one for yourself if you want. You know, the what I call the Rosetta Stone, putting it up in the space right above the door, between the door header and the ceiling. Just stare at those letters and let your mind wander, estimating, measuring, calculating, reckoning, Shin Ayin Reshing. Anyway, I'm not sure where we're at for time. Feels like we're about at the mark here, Carla. Is that...
Yeah, take your time to wrap it up.
Okay. Well, anyway, I think that just about covers it. You know, the picture here of a kind of like the big mouth of a shark, like a mountain about to eat the world on fire. Picture on top kind of correlated to the picture down below. Just so you know, these two rows of little graphic pictures here. The top row, I tried to draw the simple little glyph of each letter. Like Kuf is a pair of binoculars. And it's like, how's Kuf binoculars? Well, it's this view, this panoramic view, this mushroom-shaped aerial view, this overview, this pillar of fire, pillar of smoke view of like the lid of the treasure chest. Resh, you know, a little stick figure with wings and like a crown, a shining like Jesus in the sky with angels. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, Beatles song. The concept of saying this is like this deified heavenly projection of some stature of human being in a different way or something. I mean, again, they're little symbolic little glyphs. Shin, kind of the world on fire, and it's like Yahuah said at some point, whether it's Revelation 18, where Babylon the Great gets destroyed, whether it's Yeshua coming back, Revelation 19, the sword coming out of his mouth. And who gets destroyed? What is the sword coming out of his mouth? If that's where we are, to have Hazadi, his language restored, that's a sword coming out of his mouth. Everything he said, it's just going to cut everything apart. So whoever is standing in his way, remember, Yeshua did have this other thing. It's a pretty rough concept. I forget where it's going to be found, but Yeshua said there's going to become a point where he's going to say, those people that think he's a nice guy, he said, bring the people that didn't want me to rule over them and slay them here in front of me. If you think that your Jesus doesn't have rules, doesn't want you to obey his command, you might be one of those that are going to be put to death right in front of him when he shows up. That's what he said. Those who don't want me to rule over them, those who won't acknowledge my voice of command, telling them what to do and not do, this is really serious stuff. Kind of like the mouth of the shark. It's like SHIN is teeth. Draw it with a sharp pointed W on purpose. It's like sharp teeth. And he's going to make a distinction. It's life or death. It's the second life or the second death. It's eternity that we're dealing with here. And if you find some of these words uncomfortable, just realize, good, be disturbed. At the letter Tav, same kind of shape of the X shape, a little glyph of a guy rejoicing like, wow, I made it. Or skull and crossbones. No, you didn't. That's it for you. Cease to exist forever. And just so you know, as long as we're talking about a little glyph, what the heck is this square with a little black triangle in the lower left corner? How can that be? And just so you know, as I did the top row of glyphs, to be each letter, like the Zadi is a picture of a casket with a skeleton waking up, like the skeleton just picture, you're dead in the grave, and all of a sudden you wake up and you're just a rotten corpse skeleton. You go, what? I thought I was dead. What's going on here? And it's like, whoop, uh-oh, resurrection, uh-oh. So it's a skeleton waking up with, surprise lines above his head. But the pictures underneath, the bottom row of pictures here, is kind of a combination of the upper letters, not necessarily each one exactly correlated one at a time. So the idea of kind of the shark's mouth shaped like a mountain is like, well, that's the resh, and that's the SHIN, and the resh underneath here, it's like, what kind of a thing is that? Well, it's drawn as a trunk with roots and branches, and there's arrows pointing like, what are the roots? It pulls in from here, from what's the surrounding, into the trunk, and then it's a picture of what a manifold does, basically. Think of a car exhaust manifold or intake manifold. It's a channeling and diversification, which is literally what the word nun samic ayin or samic ayin pei is a basically a manifold picture. But it's just a basic idea of Yahusha says, I only do what I see my Father doing, and I only say what I hear him saying. So he's inputting, like his roots are in Yahuah, his Father. He pulls in, that's all he has, and he's the trunk. He's the structure of that house of Israel, that tree, King of the Jews, if you want to call him that. And then who are his branches? Us, that are plugged into him being the trunk. So it's this concept of the rest thing. But just to give identification, the square with the triangle, see, you have to go all the way over here to the Aleph position, and there's an ox head under the Aleph, but this bottom picture is like a designer's table. There's a little chair and a lamp behind a work table. There's a couple papers off to the right, but the thing that the guy was working on is a square paper with a little triangle in the left corner, which is that paper there. So it's just a little subtle comment that the Aleph plan, out of all the possibilities of what he was considering, so you've got these scraps of paper over here, the plan being the square piece with a little black triangle. Yeah, that's what it's going to be. Dalet happens to be the triangle door, and so it's like, okay, there's this one door, and so that's the piece of paper that ends up being the Tav here, saying that is the plan that gets accomplished here. And you could say, did you find the door? Were you able to figure out what door? Did you iron the Dalet? Here's a clue. Iron the Tavs. Understand the one Tav of the 22 factored Tav, because it'll tell you who the Dalet, what the Dalet is, and how to get in the Dalet. Did you make it in? You had one thing to do while you're on the face of the earth. Find the door and make sure you can get in the door. How you doing with that? That's the significance of that picture. Anyway, next week we'll talk about Tav, so we should close it out here. You want to sign us out, Carla?
Sure. Hallelujah for thy SHIN that has provided for us teeth which to consume with thy word, thy paps, Abba, thy provision, thine gifts, thine word, thy desire for who we are to be. And for that we praise thee. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Amen.
Amen.